Hello everyone and welcome to this video in which I will show you step by step how to fill the ERAS application, especially with all the changes that happened to ERAS for March 2024 applicants. And by the end of this video, I'm going to share with you a free sample of an excellent ERAS application that has detailed descriptions of the different sections we'll be going over throughout this video. We'll start with the personal information, so if you click here, we'll start with the account information. If you click on edit account information, you'll get this screen where they ask you about your first name, your last name, middle name, your contact email, so make sure you have the accurate email that you have access to throughout the match cycle, because this is going to be probably the main communication method. Your gender, you have man, woman, another gender, decline to answer, and you'll have the birth date. And then you click save. Then if you check this box, it will release your birth date to programs. What they're telling you here that if you don't release your birth date, it doesn't exclude the documents that have your birth date that are submitted to the program, such as your school transcript, for example. Now let's go to the basic information. All these fields are not required. You can see the required ones have the star here, and the only required one here is the phone number. If you have a preferred name, alternate phone number, pronoun, you can fill that here. Now let's move on to the address. It's required to fill the address, so you need to provide the mailing address, which means the address that you would like to receive mails to. So you provide the street number, country, state, city, and then they ask you, is that your permanent address? Because some people might be living in China, but they have a mailing address in the US of some relative who can receive mails for them. So your mailing address doesn't necessarily have to be your permanent address. If yes, you click yes. If no, it will open another boxes where you can fill your permanent address. Now let's move on to work authorization, which is important especially for international graduates, because it will ask you about what do you have that would allow you to work in the US. So the first question is, are you currently authorized to work in the US? And if the answer is yes, they're going to ask you on which basis. What is your current work authorization? Are you a US citizen? Are you a green card holder, etc.? If the answer is no, they ask you, will you need visa sponsorship through the J1 or the H1 to complete your residency? And if the answer is yes, they're going to ask you, do you want H1, J1, or both? And it's important to fill these boxes because these information will show to program. So if you're someone who only wants H1, for example, and you apply to a program with only J1 sponsorship, they will probably not interview you. And that's better for both of you, not to waste your time and go and interview with a program that only accepts J1, but you are only looking for H1. If you're an international graduate who needs a visa, I would recommend applying to both programs. And then if you receive a lot of interviews, you might choose to interview only at H1 programs, or once you interview, you only rank the H1 programs or rank the H1 programs higher. So I would recommend checking both boxes and keeping your options open, and then after you receive multiple interviews, you can narrow down your options. Here they're asking if you live now in the US or Canada, which state do you live? You might choose to answer this question with no, but you need to provide information on how you'll be able to work in the US as part of your residency. Now let's move on to the match information, and there is an important distinction between the NRMP and the ERAS, because some people confuse the two. ERAS is the process in which you submit your application to programs. NRMP is the process responsible for matching you with the program after the interviews. Be mindful that you need to register for the NRMP separately and pay the NRMP fee. So that's why they're asking you, are you planning to participate in the NRMP match? And if you answer yes, they're going to ask for your NRMP ID. One thing that some people get anxious about is that, oh, I don't have my NRMP ID. That is fine. You can still submit your ERAS application now. And once you have your NRMP ID, you can come back and update this information. And that's what this is telling you. If you currently don't have NRMP ID, please enter it as soon as you receive it. NRMP ID is not required to certify and submit your ERAS application. And here they tell you what I was just talking about. Please note that by registering or participating with my ERAS does not automatically register you for the match, which is the NRMP match. And this is the link to register for NRMP. Then they ask you if you're participating as couple. If you're applying by yourself, it's no. If you're applying with a couple, it's yes. And then you enter your partner's name and the specialty that your partner is applying to. The urology match is separate from the NRMP. That's why they're asking for the AUA member number. And you can provide that here. And of course, if you're applying for the urology match, it would be no for the NRMP match. Here, they're asking about your USMLE or ECFMG ID, which is the number you saw multiple times on your USMLE transcripts, the step 1, step 2 CK. So just provide that number here. And then they ask you to check the box if you're ACLS, PALS, BLS certified. So check the boxes if you have this certificate. If you check the box, it will ask you for the expiration date, so just choose the expiration date. Then there are 2 questions that mainly apply to US students. If you have an Alpha Omega Alpha status, so if you have any of these, you can select that, and the same for the Gold Humanism Honor Society status. Don't worry if you're an international graduate. Most international graduates don't have this status. So you can pick no and no. If you have any of these, you can pick that. Then you click on Save Personal Information and we move on to the next category. Now let's move on to the biographic information and we'll start with the self-identification. What you need to know here is that if you prefer not to self-identify, please ignore this section. So you can just jump right into the language proficiency. But if you choose to answer this question, these are the categories. So there is the major category and there is the subcategory. Some might ask, well, why do I need to answer this question, or how will my answer be used? What I think is that answering this question will not hurt your chances in programs, because that would be considered racist if they exclude an applicant based on their how they self-identify or based on their race. But this question might be used in the diversity standpoint that programs are trying to increase. So if a program has 0 Hispanic or 0 African American, and this year they're trying to increase diversity of residents in their program, they might use the answer to this question to look more at Hispanic applicants or African American applicants or whatever applicants they want to look at. So that's why I don't think answering this question will hurt your chances. It might actually help you, especially if you're from an underrepresented minority. But if you don't prefer to self-identify, you can ignore this section. As you can see, there are many nuances to the ERAS application, to the questions, how you should answer them, and we will go through even more complicated questions, especially in the experiences part. That's why I think spending time on filling your ERAS application, getting an advice from someone who is experienced, who have gone through the process, to avoid mistakes that might really hurt your chances of matching into residency. You spend all that time, all that money, you don't want to waste that by answering certain questions wrong. If you don't have access to these experienced advisors, experienced editors who can help your CV stand out and represent who you are and what you've done throughout all these years, reach out to us. We have a great group of experienced advisors who are physicians who have gone through the process, not only language editors. And these physician advisors will not only make sure that the language is excellent, but they will make sure that the presentation of your experiences, the presentation of the information in your ERAS stands out. Now let's move on to the language fluency. If you pick add entry, you'll see the definition of each category, of each level of language proficiency, so it's clear to everyone, and then you pick the languages. So if you're applying to residency in the US, program directors are expecting to see English either among the native or the advanced category, because otherwise you won't be able to communicate easily with patients. Because if you look here on the good category, I have some difficulty communicating necessary health concepts, and that might raise concerns to program directors. And of course, you can add any other language that you speak, French, German, Russian, even if they fall under the basic, fair, or good category. Next comes the military information. If you're committed to fulfill a US military active service, you can click yes, otherwise click no. Do you have any other service obligation? Military service, public health, state programs, you answer yes or no based on your situation. Now let's move on to talk about geographic preferences, which is an important part of the ERAS application. Last year, geographic preferences were part of the supplemental ERAS, but now supplemental ERAS does not exist anymore, and they moved geographic preferences from the supplemental ERAS to the ERAS application. Why the geographic preferences section is important? Because it was used last year significantly by program directors to screen and filter applicants. Based on research done by the AAMC, 74% of respondents said that they used geographic preferences as a way to filter applicants before they did their holistic review. And there is so much data related to the results of that survey that I'm going to provide in the description below. But in summary, geographic preferences are important to fill. What you need to know here is there are multiple divisions, and each division has multiple states under that. So if you have a preference for a certain state and it falls under a division, you can pick that division. For example, I'm living in Pennsylvania now. I have a preference to stay in Pennsylvania, so I would pick the Middle Atlantic. If you pick a certain division, the information will be shared only with programs in that division. So let's say you pick Middle Atlantic, all the programs in the Middle Atlantic will be informed that you picked Middle Atlantic. However, programs in the mountain area would not know that you picked Middle Atlantic. And here you're allowed only up to 3 divisions. So you can't pick all of them. You have to pick a max of 3, which means only 3 divisions will know where you picked and the other divisions won't know which divisions you picked. You can also choose I do not have a division preference and say I want to go everywhere, but in that case you might lose on the chance of interviewing at certain programs that filtered by those who selected these divisions. So let's say a program in New England filtered by people who picked New England and not. So they only looked at the applicants who picked New England. So if you picked I don't have a division preference, in that case, you lost on that opportunity. So once you click on a certain division, you have to answer why did you pick this division? Why are you interested in coming to New England? And we've edited a lot of supplemental application last year, and this was specifically part of the supplemental ERAS application. And I've seen some students answer this question in not the best way possible, to say that in a nice way. Because as you know, there is no right or wrong answer for anything on the ERAS application. However, there are certain answers that might not be ideal to describe your preference for a location. That's why I'm going to provide you at the end of this video with an ERAS application that is fully filled with answers to everything, including the description of the location, the description of the setting, the description of the experiences that we're going to talk about, so it can show you a good example of how the description should look like. But I also believe one-on-one editing from an experienced advisor who can provide their insight on how to best fill these experiences, edit it for you, give you comments, their guidance would significantly improve the quality of your ERAS application. And that's what we saw last year with the applicants that we worked with, and you can check out their experiences and how we transformed and increased significantly the quality of their ERAS application and the supplemental ERAS application last year. So again, you have to describe why are you interested in that location. You can choose to not fill that, but I don't recommend that. I recommend you describe why are you interested in that location, and you remember you have up to 300 characters, not words, and that characters count includes spaces. So you have 3 of them. Let's say we pick these, you have to write 3 descriptions. Then we move on to the setting preference or lack of preference to the rural, suburban, or urban. And some might ask, well, what is the difference between these? What I like about this new ERAS is that they also have the description here. So if you hover over the question mark, you'll see the description. Urban is central part of a city with high population. Suburban is smaller urban area around the city and less populated. Rural is large amounts of undeveloped land with few homes or building and low population density. And if you want a more detailed description, you can click here, view detailed description, and you can find detailed description of these setting. Let's see here. You have the description of urban, you have description of suburban and rural. So urban is more like a city, rural is undeveloped land, and suburban is in between. And then you can add your hometown, which is the area you currently or previously lived and feel strong ties or sense of belonging. And you can enter up to 5 hometowns. Now let's move on to education. We'll start with higher education, which is mainly referring to undergrad and grad school. And that's gonna be none for most international students. And they're acknowledging that here, since most non-US educational systems don't follow the US model, almost all students and graduates of international schools will indicate none. So it's fine if you're an international student and you pick none here, because this will mainly apply to US students. So if you're a US student watching this video, you click on add entry, you click the institution, the location, the education tab, which is undergrad, grad, or other. Let's pick, for example, undergrad. You pick the field of study, degree expected or earned, which means do you have a degree right now or not? If you say yes, you're gonna pick the type of the degree, and you have a lot of options here, and the degree month, degree year, the date of attendance, from, to. If you didn't get a degree from this education, you'll pick no, and then you'll pick the dates of attendance. Now let's move on to medical education, which is an important part of your ERAS application. They're telling you here that if you have more than one medical school that you have attended, you can add that. And most students have attended one medical school, but some students have transferred after they started in one. So you can add the medical school that you started with and the medical school that you ended with, and any medical schools in between. So you start with the country. So let's say we're gonna pick the first option, Afghanistan. Then you'll have a list of all the schools in your country. So let's pick this one. Degree expected or earned, yes. What is the degree? So you're gonna pick the type of the degree, which is you have to look in your country what is the degree that you receive. But most students will receive the Doctor of Medicine, which is MD. But again, different countries have different degrees, such as the MBBS. The one in the UK is different. So I'm gonna provide a link where you can check what degree does your school or does your country offer. So let's pick the MD as an example. Next comes the degree date, which is the month and the year in which you get your degree, your medical degree, which might be different than the dates of your education. Some students finish their medical school exams in November of 2023, but they get their degree after 3 months, let's say in February of 2024. So in that case, the degree date is February 2024. So you have to go and pick these dates because this is in the future. You might have gotten already your degree in February of 2023, so you pick that date. The dates of education is when did you start your medical school and when did you end kind of the education in your medical school, which is the final exam, the final class you did, and the final exam. That is considered the dates of education. So let's say you started in September of 2017 and you finished in, let's say, September of 2023. So these are the dates of your education, but your degree came in February of 2024. And you can change the dates based on your situation. Now let's move on to the postgraduate training, which is mainly referring to residency and fellowship. And there are certain requirements. Not any residency or fellowship will count here. So if you click on add entry and see type of training, you can see the different categories. ACGME, or all these letters that represent different type of fellowships. AOA fellowship, AOA internship, AOA residency. So if you did residency in your home country that is not ACGME accredited, or a fellowship that doesn't fall under any of these categories, you should not include your residency here. It should go under your experiences. If you did an ACGME residency or any of these, you add that. So let's click, for example, ACGME residency. You pick the specialty, let's say abdominal radiology. You pick the institution and the program. You type that, the country, the city. You put the setting, which is the rural, suburban, urban that we talked about. You type the name of the program director, the supervisor, and the dates of your residency and fellowship. And some people might ask, well, that doesn't make sense. How are they asking me about residency if I am applying to residency? Well, some people already completed the residency and they're applying for another residency. That's why this question exists. If you did a graduate degree such as Masters of Science or Masters of Public Health, that should go here under higher education, because the postgraduate training is mainly focused on residency and fellowship. Now let's go to the additional information, and we'll start with the membership in honorary or professional societies. So here you can mention what societies are you a member of, the years when you started, and when did you stop being a member, or if you're currently a member, you can also include that. And if you want to include your role, if you wanted. And then we're going to provide again a detailed sample of an ERAS CV at the end of this video, that you can look at different situations or different samples of how you can fill these sections. And remember, here you have 225 characters max. So that is not words, that's characters. Medical school awards are awards that you got in medical school. And again, you have a limit of 510 characters. I always recommend, whenever you mention any award, you mention what is this award for, or why did you win that award. If you mention this name of this award without explaining why you were granted the award, it doesn't tell the person who's reading your CV why you got this award or why this award was valuable in the first place. So if you're ranked first in your country and that's why you get the award, now I'm impressed because that tells me that you were ranked first. But if you just mention the name of the award without any explanation, it won't provide context to the people that are reading your CV. Here, other awards, accomplishments. So any other award that you got outside your medical school. Some people won championships in sports or music. So you can include these here. And again, I recommend you mention the date and why you got this award. And as I said, at the end of this video, I'll provide a detailed sample of how you can fill these sections. Now let's move on to the most important part, in my opinion, of the whole ERAS application, which is your experiences. And this is actually one of the parts that they changed significantly this year compared to the last year ERAS application by doing multiple things. They combined both the ERAS application, the supplemental ERAS application in one, and they limited the number of experiences to 10. Last year, there was no limit. You can submit as many experiences as you like. This year, they limited up to 10, which is, in my opinion, is a good move because now you have 10 experiences that people can read rather than having applicants submit 20, 30 experiences, splitting every research experience project they did as a separate experience just to show the reader that they have a lot of experiences. I think this way you concise your experiences, you show me the most important ones, and then you can highlight the 3 most meaningful experiences, which is another new thing they added for the ERAS application. So let's start by clicking on add entry and I'll explain to you the different things that they added and what each means as we're going through one. Let's read what they have here. First, identify and describe up to 10 experiences that communicate who you are, what you're passionate about, and what is most important to you. Some applicants might have 15, 20 experiences. And that's what one of the things that our advisors help with is that they do a brainstorming session with you. They listen to all the experiences that you have, and then they help you pick the most important experiences that you can highlight to program directors. That's why you need someone who has an insight about this process, who knows what program directors look for, what they would like to see in an applicant, so they can present from your experiences the one that makes you stand out, the one that convey strength and what can make a good resident. After picking these 10 experiences, you can identify and describe up to 3 experiences that you found the most meaningful. Let's start with the experience type because this will decide on all the other things. So you have education training, which includes rotations, especially for international graduates who list the rotations they did in the US, such as sub-Is, electives, observerships, clerkships. These fall under this category. Military service is self-explanatory. Other extracurricular activity, club or hobby, and that's if you want to list sports or music or theater as one of your experiences. And some might say, well, I don't want to mention sport in my ERAS application or application to residency. Actually, on the contrary, these are very important because they can show you as a well-rounded applicant. And remember, you have up to 10 experiences. So you don't need to pick 10 experiences as hobbies, but you might pick one as hobby, one as educational training, one as professional organization, and one research to show how diverse of an applicant you are. Again, that shows the importance of guidance when you're filling your ERAS application and how our advisors can help you. Because you don't want to show that you are only focused on educational training without anything else, and vice versa. You don't want to show that you're only doing hobbies without any experiences that would reflect on what a good resident would be. And some people might actually stand out by these extracurricular activity. If they're a champion of tennis or they won Olympic medal or something like that, that would really make them stand out. Professional organization, if you're part of a society or an organization on a local, international, national level, that would qualify as an experience. If you want to mention professional organization as an experience, I recommend that you are more than just a member in a society. You have to be doing something in that organization for that experience to be standing out or to be worth mentioning in your ERAS application as one of the 10 experiences that you have. Research is research. There is a lot of categories of research. There is basic science, translational, clinical that you will find under the other questions that we will be answering. But if you've dedicated any time to research, even working on some projects, that would fall under the research category. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about the research experience because this is one area I see a lot of students make mistakes in, is that if you've done some research and you've published some papers, you don't need to mention the publications under the description of research, especially that there is character limit here. So the publications go under publications, and we'll talk about that next. But the experience that you got out of research falls under research. So you don't need to repeat the publications, but you can talk about your responsibilities, what you learned, without necessarily repeating your publication. And as I said, I'm going to provide you with a detailed sample of an ERAS application with the research experience filled, so you can have an idea about what can you include under the description of the research experience. And the link to download that ERAS application sample will be in the description below, so go ahead and check that out. Teaching or mentoring, if you were paid to teach someone, like tutoring a student or being a high school teacher or assisting with something in your school, or being an instructor for anatomy, for example. Volunteer service advocacy is any type of unpaid volunteering experience that you did. Work, on the other hand, is paid experiences: clinical, non-clinical, business, entrepreneurship. These all fall under work. So you have 8 experience types. The more diverse, the better, in my opinion. Let's pick the research, for example. Let's say the position title is a research fellow. Organization, let's say, for example, Mayo Clinic. If you pick I'm currently working in this role, it will remove the required from the end date because you're currently actively in that position, but you can put the end date in the future, that you'll end that position, let's say in March of 2024 by match day or later. If you're not currently in that role, you pick the month and the year of your start and end date. One thing to keep in mind is that you can put things that are starting in the future, and you don't have to provide description for that. But let's say you're starting a research position in December of 2023, but you're submitting your application in September of 2023. So you want to show on your CV that you're starting a position in 2 months, because once you submit your ERAS application, and we'll talk about that, you won't be able to change these experiences. So in that case, you can tell people that, yeah, I haven't started, and I'm honest about that. I'm telling you the date, that's going to be in 2 months, but I'm starting that position, which will give me that experience. Then you pick the country, the city, state, postcode or zip code. The participation frequency is important, and this is again part of the supplemental that was added into ERAS. You have one time, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. And I'll provide a definition of each of these as part of the sample CV I promised you. You have the setting that we talked about, the urban, suburban, and rural. 2 important parts of each experience is the primary focus and the key characteristic. And I've seen a lot of students last year who skipped filling the primary focus and the key characteristic because it's not required, so they don't fill them. And that is not right, because a lot of program directors might be filtering or ordering these experiences by certain primary focus that are important to them. And here you can see the big list that I'm not going to go into the detail of each because most of them are self-explanatory, but I'm also going to provide the definition of each in the sample CV that I was talking about. Here you can see the key characteristics. It has communication, critical thinking, empathy. So you might have a program director who organizes these experiences by having critical thinking first, culture and humanity second, or picking applicants with certain key characteristics. So that's why I think there is no loss in adding a primary focus or key characteristic other than spending time on it, which is you should do for all your experiences. On the other hand, if you don't fill them, you might lose on a chance from certain program directors who are looking for applicants with certain key characteristics. Here you have to provide description of each experience by talking about your responsibilities, your roles, and context. Provide context to that experience. And you have a limit of 1,020 characters. Again, not 1,020 words, it's 1,020 characters. And I'll provide multiple descriptions of different types of experiences in the sample CV that I will provide as part of this video. But if you ask me, what is the area that students need most help with? I would say here. This description of the experience is the area that most students need an advisor to help them edit the paragraph for them and make sure it looks great. 0 mistakes, and it stands out with highlighting what you actually did and presenting your strength to program directors or people reading your CV. There are multiple ways to present the information in your description. Some might prefer the bullet points, some prefer the paragraphs. Me personally, I prefer the bullet points because I feel it makes it easier for the reader to go through your CV and go through your experiences. But I don't think there is one right or wrong answer here. If you write it in a nice way that is easy to navigate and easy to read, even the paragraph is going to be great. Let's assume we added one experience that is research, Mayo Clinic. The title is research fellow. I put random description just as in the sake of the example. Now you'll see that you have the option to add it as a meaningful experience or one of the 3 most meaningful. So again, you have up to 10 experiences, but up to 3 can qualify as most meaningful. And here you can hover over this and it tells you identify up to 3 experiences that you found the most meaningful. So let's say we have 10 and we want to pick this as one of our most meaningful experiences. So once you click on this checkbox, it will show you what made this experience most meaningful. The research fellow, Mayo Clinic, and these dates. And this is very important. And this is, again, I found this mistake over and over last year when we were editing the supplemental ERAS application, because people wrote what they did. And here they're asking you why this experience is meaningful, which is totally different question. They're not asking you what you did. Especially now it's even more clear because you already wrote inside the responsibilities and the roles. So you, in that description, the 1020 character, you already wrote the description and what you did on this experience or your roles or your responsibilities. Here they're asking you about why this experience is meaningful. Let's read here what they have quickly. Reflect on the experience and explain why it was meaningful and how it influenced you. Weave in the focus area or key characteristics you tagged. Remember the key characteristic that we were talked about, the focus area, the empathy, the communication. If you picked one of them, they're asking you to weave that inside the description of why this experience was meaningful to you. And again, this is an area that definitely most students need help with. And if you have someone who is experienced with the process, not just a friend or a family member who speaks English well. This is way beyond just speaking English well or knowing grammar and how to write things in a nice way. This needs someone who knows what program directors are looking for. This needs someone who went through the process, who have seen a lot of examples on what is good and what is bad. Trust me, you don't want to hurt your chances of matching, repeating another year of the process, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars if you start a year later. Remember, this difference between a resident salary and an attending salary is over $200,000 to $300,000. If you delay your match by 1 year because you didn't match, that means you're losing $200,000 to $300,000. You don't want to do that because you didn't want to spend enough time or show it to enough people or spend a few $100s on editing your CV. And again, I'll provide multiple examples of how a good description looks like in the sample that I will provide as part of this video. So if you want to check that sample, go ahead and check the description below and you'll find the link to download that sample CV. Another part that was borrowed from the supplemental ERAS and was added to the ERAS application is the impactful experience. So you have a 750 characters to fill the impactful experience. And they tell you here to talk about challenges or hardships that influenced your journey to residency. And this doesn't have to be in medical school or after medical school. It could be any time of your life. And here they provide a list of experiences. So if you hover over here, you'll see these options. So they give you an example of what do you mean by a hardship or challenge. So it could be a family background. You might be the first generation to graduate from college. It could be a financial background. You come from a low-income family, or you work to support your family when you were growing up, or you work to pay for college in the US or outside the US. It could be a community setting. You might come from a community with high poverty or high crime rate. You come from a community with a lack of access to medical care. All these are challenges and hardships that make your journey to residency much more difficult than anyone else. So if you have any of these challenges or hardships, I highly recommend you include that here, because that will make you stand out as an applicant. That will make program directors understand difficulties that you went through to get here. You did not have an easy path to residency, and despite that, you fought and worked hard to achieve your goals. which will reflect that you're gonna do the same in residency. That's why these things are important. On the other hand, you don't have to fill this section if you did not go through a challenge or hardship. Don't just fill it just to fill it, because it says here, programs do not expect all applicants to complete this question. So I don't recommend just trying to make up something or make something that is not actually a hardship, try to convey it as a hardship to fill that box. I don't recommend that, but if you actually went through a challenge or hardship, I highly recommend you fill the impactful experience. And again, this is another area that needs a lot of editing and a lot of advising, because this is like a shorter version of your personal statement that talks about a challenge or hardship. And you have limited characters here, only 750. So you don't have a lot of words. It's not 750 words, it's 750 characters. So you need to make it concise, to the point, show perseverance, how you overcame that challenge, and how that challenge made you a better person, a better doctor. And finally, under the experiences, you have a question that asks about whether your medical education was interrupted or extended. If you answered no, it won't ask for anything else. If you answered yes, you have to provide details of why your medical education was interrupted or extended. And this is a serious question, so you have to answer it very carefully. If you're someone who's an international student who came to the US to do 1 month rotation that was approved by their school, that will not count as interrupted medical education, because this rotation was considered or accepted by your medical school. So be careful before you answer yes that your medical education was actually interrupted or extended, because I've seen a lot of students who answered yes and the answer should not be yes, because the things that they included were not considered as interrupted or extended. For example, I've seen one student who answered yes, it was interrupted for like 4 days because I was sick. Well, that doesn't count as interrupting your medical education. Everyone gets sick from once in a while. Residents get sick, they take days off. That does not interrupt their medical education. So if it was interrupted or considered an interruption by your medical school, you can answer that yes and answer why. Before we move on to the next section, I want to highlight how important the experiences of your ERAS application are. They are the most important part, in my opinion, of your whole ERAS application. So that's why you need to dedicate time to them. You need to think of all the different experiences you have and ask someone who's experienced through this process to look at them. I myself had a lot of my mentors and advisors look at my CV before I submitted it. And I've seen a lot of CVs throughout the last 2 years that we've been editing for different applicants, and that helped me get all this experience that I have, and the same with the advisors that we have. So if you have someone who has that type of experience, go ahead and show them your CV after you dedicate time to brainstorm about all these different experiences that you have. If you don't have someone, go ahead and check out our ERAS application editing services. We have multiple tiers, different rounds of editing. There are some packages that includes talking to the advisor so they can provide you with guidance and brainstorming on the experiences in addition to editing and transforming your CV. And of course, don't forget to download the free ERAS application sample that we have that will show you how the description should look like, show you a filled example so you can have a better idea about that. Now let's talk about licensure. If you're a medical student, most likely you won't have a license in any state, so you pick none. But if you practice in a state and have a license from that state, you click on add entry and you fill the information related to that. Additional questions, this is mainly related to your ability practicing medicine. If you have been suspended, have felonies, misdemeanors. So most of the students would have no as an answer for this, but if you have any of these as yes, you add yes and you explain why. Now let's move on to talk about publications. That might be one of the most confusing parts for a lot of medical students who have research, but once you understand or grasp the differentiation between the different types that they have, it would be easy to complete. So let's start with add entry, and I'm gonna go through each of these types to explain them and show you how to fill that. And you'll see here peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts, and another one called peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts other than published. So the main difference between these two is that the first one would refer to published articles. The other one is anything other than published, and we'll see the different categories under this one here. So let's start with the published. Once you click on this, you'll see the publication type, which we already selected. You're gonna type the title of the article or the abstract, and then you're gonna write the author's publication name, which is referring to the journal. We're gonna add the article URL. This is not required. The PMID also not required. Then the volume, issue number, and pages are required, and the month and the year of the publication. The authors, they wanted in specific format, which is the last name, comma, first initial, dot, middle initial, dot, comma, and then you continue with the other authors. So for example, my name, I would type ASAAD, comma, M, period, comma, and then I would write the rest of the authors. If I had a middle name, which I don't, let's say my middle name starts with A, so I would write the first initial of that. So you'd write your last name, comma, first initial, dot, middle initial, dot, comma, and then the other authors. But I'm gonna show you now how to fill the volume, the pages, issue number. I'm gonna go to my PubMed and show you through one of my papers. I'm not gonna pick these because they're ahead of print, so they don't have the volume and issue number, and we'll see that that's one of the differentiating factor between published and non-published articles. So we're gonna scroll down and pick this article. No differences in surgical and patient-reported outcomes among alloderm surgery and dermacell for pre-pectoral implant-based breast reconstruction. So this is the title of the article. This is the journal, Plastic Reconstructive Surgery. This is the year, this is the month, this is the day, but this is not one of the required fields. This is the volume, the 151. Here 151 is the volume. This is the issue, and these are the pages. So going back here, there is volume, issue, and pages. PMID, you find that here, PMID. The URL is the link of the paper, so you can open the journal website and you can copy paste the link from there. So you can just copy paste this link. And the authors, so you need to format these authors in the format of ERAS. So one thing I want to mention before we move on to the next category is the word abstracts here. Because most of the time, the articles published in a journal are full text articles. But sometimes if you present an abstract in a meeting and that meeting publishes the abstracts that are presented in a journal, usually in a supplement of a journal, you can add these abstracts here. And this is a huge point if you want to increase the number of your publications, because it's much harder to get a full text article in a journal compared to an abstract. But unfortunately at this point, my ERAS combines these two categories under the same umbrella. So if you have an article or an abstract in a peer-reviewed journal, they both fit here. So one way for program directors or people reviewing your CV to know which one is an abstract, which one is an article, is usually it says here in the volume and the issue number that this is a supplement, the word S. But sometimes people overlook these things. So if you have an abstract published in a peer-reviewed journal as a result of you presenting in a meeting, that fits here, and that is separate from the oral presentation or the poster presentation you did. And as I mentioned, I will have a detailed sample of an ERAS application with different types of publications, with different types of presentations, so you can see how these different categories look like on the ERAS application. And you can get that sample CV by going to the description and following the link to download that sample. Now let's move on to the peer-reviewed journal articles other than published. So once you click on this, you see the boxes are less here, because other than published means they are not published, which means they don't have a volume and issue number and pages. That's why you don't see these here. You see article URL, you see the status, month, year, name, authors, title. So title is the title of the paper, author is the same way, you format it the same way, publication name is the journal name, article URL simple. Publication status, we'll see the options you have submitted, under review, accepted in press, and preprint. These categories, in my opinion, are not the best to describe the different stages of the publication. So if you're not very familiar with the stages of publications, once you submit your article to a journal, it's under the submitted category because you just submitted it to the journal. Then it goes to review. The problem though is that so many times the author won't know when their article is submitted but not under review versus under review. Because some journals tell you, oh, we sent it to review, while other journals do not say that. So that might be confusing to some students, is that they won't know whether their article is in the submitted category or the under review. So if your journal tells you whether your article is submitted or under review, you can pick one of these categories. But a lot of journals, once you submit, they send it to review automatically, and then you hear from them in 2 months. And in that case, the student won't know if their paper is in the submitted category or the under review category. So in that case, if you just submitted the paper to the journal, it didn't receive a reference number or something, put it under the submitted. If your article received a reference number, that means it might be going to review and you might pick under review category. Accepted Impress is totally different. So now there is a clear distinction between these two and Accepted Impress. Accepted means you receive from the journal an email saying your article is accepted. Accepted is different than minor revisions. Minor revisions means it's still under review. Accepted means it's fully accepted. Impress is that step after being accepted. So once a paper is accepted, it goes for like final checks and checking grammar, checking the images. So that is the Impress stage, and that comes after the accepted. Sometimes journals publish Impress articles online ahead of print before they assign them an issue and a volume number and pages. So the main difference between this category, the Accepted Impress, and the under review is that the article is fully accepted here. The difference between Accepted Impress and published is that Accepted Impress does not have a volume and issue number and pages, while on the other hand, the published ones do have that. So even if it's published online or ahead of print, as I'll show you now some of my papers, it's still under the Accepted Impress category. Preprint might not be as some people might think. Some people might think, oh, preprint, it's almost after accepted before it's getting printed. And that's not the case. For publications, preprint means that some authors put the paper on online or on websites before it goes to peer review or as it's going through the peer review process. So this is actually the stage sometimes before submitted, or it happens at the same time that the paper is under review. So you might have put your paper in preprint while it's going the review process in that journal. So that means the paper gets online before it's actually peer reviewed. But that doesn't mean it's not going to get peer reviewed. It might be now under peer review. Some might ask, well, why do people do that? Why would they publish their papers online before it goes through the peer review process? And the answer is to give quick access to people to science. Because, for example, with COVID-19, they wanted to put their results out quickly as the paper is going through the peer review process, which might take months. So they didn't want to delay people hearing about that. So they put it in preprint, and at the same time, it's under review in the journal. So now you might ask, well, what if my paper is under preprint and under review, or preprint and accepted? So if it's accepted, I would just pick accepted. I think this is the best category of these. But what if your paper is preprint and under review? In that case, you have to pick whatever you think would be more ideal to your case. I'm going to show you now an example from my Impress article. So if you look, for example, at this one, ChatGPT is equivalent to first year plastic surgery residents. It's in a journal. It has date, a year and a month. It has a DOI, but it says online ahead of print. Do you see a volume, issue number, and pages? No, there is no volume and issue number and pages. Although the paper is published, if you click on it, you would see the abstract. You can go and see the full article here from Aesthetic Surgery Journal. But that might be confusing to some people, is that, well, this is published. No, this is online ahead of print, which means it's not fully published, because the main thing that makes a paper published is the issue number, the volume number, and the pages. And as I said, if you have any questions about any of these, how to fill the ERAS CV, you need help editing these publications section or the experiences section, we have an amazing list of experienced editors who are physicians and native speakers who can help you with that, and you can check all that in the description of this video. Now let's move on to another type of publications, which is the peer-reviewed book chapters. So if you click on here, you'll see the chapter title. So you're gonna type the title of the chapter you contributed to, the name of the book, the list of the authors, the same format, the publisher, editors, the pages. These are all information that are easily available on the book that you wrote. Pages is the pages of the chapter you wrote, because the book, generally people when they write book chapters, they don't write the full book, they write chapters from that book. Then you put the country where this book got published, the state, city, and the year. And that means you need to add book chapters that actually got published, because they're asking so many information about the published book. Scientific monographs are a detailed piece about a specific topic that provides detailed information about that, and this is not very common among medical students who do research, at least in the medical field. Poster and oral presentations, very common, and a lot of students have a long list of these. So let's start with oral presentations. So oral presentations is a presentation you did at a local or national or international meeting. Generally, you submit an abstract. These abstracts get reviewed and then they inform you of your abstract getting published. One misconception I see around oral presentations is that some students add a presentation they did in their medical school or in front of the residents, and they count it as an oral presentation because they did it orally. And this is not the purpose of oral presentations. Oral presentations have to be on something bigger than just you presenting to residents. If you, for example, sent an abstract to a school research day, to a medical school research day, or a department research day, and these abstracts got reviewed and then you presented it at that research day, that's a different story. But if you just do a presentation for the residents or for your friends or for medical students, that doesn't count as oral presentation. To fill this section, you need the title of the oral presentation, the author list, same format, what is the meeting or the event, for example, Medical School Research Day, or the American Society of Cardiology, or the American Society of GI. Then you put the country, the city, the state, and the presentation date. One thing that some students ask about is, well, what if I contributed to a oral presentation, but I didn't present it myself? So I was among the author list of those who did the resident who did the presentation. So you were like second or third author on the presentation, but the resident presented the research, not you. Should you add this to your CV? And in my opinion, yes, you should add this to your CV, because you contributed to that research. Although you did not personally present it, you still did some work and maybe collected data or contributed to the abstract. So in that case, you deserve to get credit for your work. However, I like to keep things clear to the people reviewing my CV. So what I did when I was filling my CV, because I had a lot of presentations, some I did, some were presented by my other co-authors, I put a star next to the presenter. So whenever I was the presenter, I put a star next to my name. Whenever somebody else was the presenter, I put a star next to their name. Another thing is that most people who present the abstract, they are usually first authors. So whenever you're not first author, that tells people that you're not the presenter. But you can add the star if you think that would help people to make sure that you are the presenter versus someone else. So oral presentation is that you giving a podium presentation. You would be talking to a group of people about your research and generally in a big hall. On the other hand, poster presentation, there would be a poster behind you in a hall and you would stand next to that poster and people come by and you talk about your research, they ask you questions. So it's generally in meetings, it's generally considered less than an oral presentation. Oral presentation is higher status than poster presentation, but still, good, and you're presenting it to people and you're building connections in that conference. And by the way, we have a detailed blog post and a detailed lesson in our research course that talks about poster presentation. And for those who are interested in learning about research, we have a detailed course to teach you about that. So now there is no reason for anyone to say, oh, well, I don't have research experience. This course will teach you almost everything you need to know about clinical research. Unlike all our courses, it's 100% satisfaction guarantee, which means if you're not happy, we give you your money back. We have courses about clinical research, how to do statistical analysis, how to do a systematic review, which is an amazing skill to have. Why? Because you can do it from anywhere in the world. You don't have to have big data because you're relying on published data already. And all these courses, as I said, are 100% satisfaction guarantee. So for the poster, you can put the title here, presenters the same way as the oral presentation, event or meeting, country, city, state, and presentation date. Now let's move on to the next category. You have peer-reviewed online publication and non-peer-reviewed online publication. What does this mean? What does peer-reviewed online publication mean? It means that you published something not in a peer-reviewed journal. So if you publish something, even if it was online in a peer-reviewed journal, that counts as a peer-reviewed article because it's part of the journal. It got an issue number and a page number, even if the journal is online. Because you'll find some peer-reviewed journals that don't print the articles. It's online, so it gets an issue number, a volume number, and pages that are electronic pages. You would see E next to that. And let me see if I have an example of that here. And this is an example of that here. So although we have a month, year, volume, issue pages, you see the E next to the pages because these are electronic pages. So although this paper might not have been printed on the journal, or maybe they only printed the first page, or maybe the journal doesn't print at all, it's still a peer-reviewed article because it's in a peer-reviewed journal, and this is a journal. It's not an online publication. On the other hand, online publication refers to something like up-to-date. Up-to-date is peer-reviewed, so if you published an article in up-to-date, that counts as a peer-reviewed online publication. So you can put the title, authors, publication date, and the URL, which is the link. The same for StatPearls. On the other hand, non-peer-reviewed online publication, if you publish in a blog post or on a website that is not peer-reviewed, that would count as non-peer-reviewed online publication. You can put the title, authors, date, and URL. And that shows you that you can still add non-peer-reviewed online publication, things that you published on a blog post, on your ERAS application. And finally, we have the other articles which don't fit in any of these categories, and you can put the title, authors, publication name, URL, if any, and publication date. I know publications might be confusing, and which category should you put your publication under might not be easy to figure out. So if you have any questions about that, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can, or you can reach out to our email info@thematchguy.com. Before we move on to the next section, make sure to check out the research courses we have. We have courses to teach you how to do statistical analysis, how to publish a paper, take it from idea to publication, how to do systematic reviews, and multiple others. And all these courses are 100% refund back if you're not satisfied with the course. And don't forget to download your ERAS application sample, which will have different examples of publication types and how you should write them on your ERAS CV, in addition to detailed description of different experiences. And you can download that CV from the link in the description below. After you fill all these sections of your ERAS application, you go to the Certify and Submit. And you'll be presented with your application checklist where you can check which parts are complete, which parts are incomplete. One thing to keep in mind, which is very important, is that once you certify and submit your ERAS application, you won't be able to change it. This is very, very important. Your personal statement, your letters of recommendation can be changed, and I'll tell you about that next. But once you certify your ERAS application and submit it, you won't be able to change these sections, except the personal information, which is this part here. So this is the only part that you can change, especially the NRMP ID. After you certify and submit, all these sections cannot be changed. That's why you need to take time to make sure everything is correct. You take time to think about these experiences. You have an experienced advisor and editor go through these, because once you submit them, there is no comeback. Once you fill these sections, you can view, print your ERAS application or CV, which are going to be very similar. The CV is going to be slightly shorter than the application. You don't need to certify or submit your ERAS CV to be able to do this PDF version of it. And when we edit ERAS applications or CVs for applicants, we ask them to fill it in this format so we can edit it in the ERAS format. So once we send it back to them, it's ready to submit. Now, another very important part of my ERAS now is the program signaling, which was part of the supplemental ERAS application last year, but now it's part of the ERAS application. This is very, very important because it can tell programs that you are very interested in them. You picked one of the few signals that you have for the specialty to give it to that program. And this will be an important factor for program directors to select applicants or review applications. And that was reflected by the survey that AAMC did last year, and there was big emphasis on applicants who signaled the program, so programs would be more likely to interview applicants that signaled them. So that's why, if you're listening to this video, I would like you to take time to be very considerate of who you'll be sending your signals to. You have to be very wise in the selection of the programs that you signal based on realistic expectations, based on your application, based on the strength of the application, based on where you would like to go and train, and whether these programs would offer you what you're looking for. And that's actually one of the things that our advisor helps the applicant with, is to strategize about program signaling as part of the 1 hour that we have for the unlimited package of our ERAS application editing. Because this is a golden opportunity for your application to be seen by a program. If you signal a program, you have a very high likelihood of your application being seen by the program. Because remember, there is very limited number of signals and it varies by specialty. So if you go to this link here that I'll provide for you, you can see the specialty and the number of program signals. For example, for anesthesiology, you have 5 gold and 10 silver. The gold is higher quality than or importance than the silver. So if you give one of your gold to a program, that means they got one of the 5 signals you have. That means you're valuing them a lot compared to a program that didn't get any signal. On the other hand, for internal medicine, you have 7 signals. For ortho, because it's a very competitive specialty, they did 30 signals. For ENT, 25 signals. For thoracic surgery, 3. So if a program receives a signal from you, they know that they are at the top 3 of your list. Why? Because they're one of 3 programs that got your signal. And by the way, to help you with program signaling and choosing a realistic list of programs you can signal, we created a list of different residency programs across the US with different specialties, cutoff scores, whether they sponsor visa, which type of visa, US clinical experience, year of graduation, and for international medical graduates, we added the percentage of IMGs. So if you're an IMG and you don't have that competitive application, you can search for programs that have higher percentage of IMGs. So you can filter by that by choosing, I want only programs that accept over 50% IMGs, over 70%. You can also search and filter by step scores. You can say, I want to look at programs that accept students with less than 250, less than 240, less than 230. And that can help you create a realistic list of programs that you can apply to that accepted students that are similar to yours in the past. And I'll provide the link for this list in the description below. In this case here, we're applying to internal medicine, so you can see here signal count 7 available. So when we go down to these programs and click on this action, you can assign a signal. So this could be one of the programs you assign a signal and it tells you that you have 7 remaining. Before we move on to few final tips about the ERAS application, if you find any value in this video, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your colleagues who are applying to residency, because this video will help them a lot in how to fill the ERAS application. Now to answer a very important question that I get asked from students every single year. Should I submit an ERAS application that is incomplete until I get my step 2 CK score or until I get my letter of recommendation? Or should I wait and submit the ERAS application later once everything is complete? And in my opinion, it's better to submit an incomplete application rather than submitting your ERAS application late. And the reason for that is, if you did not submit your application, programs who open the applications early will not see your application, which means you're not considered for that program at all. You're 0% to them because they don't see anything. And again, by incomplete application, we're referring to the LORs and the scores or the ECFMG certificate. We're not talking about not filling the experiences of your CV, because these are things you should fill by the time you submit your application. I'm talking about the LORs, step scores, and ECFMG certificate, which are the things I usually get asked about. If you submit your ERAS application without these things and the program opens your application early, they would still see your application. They might not consider it as highly as someone who filled their full ERAS application and had their full list of LORs and ECFMG certificate, but at least you'd have a shot. They would see your application, and then you can email them later that you got your certificate, you got your score. Once you get these scores and LORs, your application updates. So that's why, in my opinion, it's better to submit an incomplete application in terms of ECFMG certificate, in terms of step 2 CK score, in terms of letters of recommendation, rather than submitting late once everything is ready. As I promised you in the beginning of this video, I'm gonna provide you with a detailed sample of an excellent ERAS application with detailed description of different experiences. To get this CV, click on the link in the description below and you'll get an email to confirm your subscription to our email list. And once you do that, you will receive another email with the link to download that CV. Sometimes these emails go to your spam or junk folder, so make sure to check out your spam folder if you have not received it in your inbox. And if you don't receive it within 15 to 20 minutes of your subscription, email us at info@thematchguy.com to email you the CV.